Hi there, welcome to this week's video on DeClickers. Now, if you've ever tried doing anything with dialogue, particularly audiobooks, then you will know that mouth noise is the absolute bane of the narrator / voice actor, and therefore the bane of the audio engineer. I am prone to pretty bad mouth noises myself. You can probably hear them right now, but I recently had a day when I made myself have extra awful mouth noises purely so I could test what plugin was best for getting rid of them. Before I open up Reaper and show you what I have prepared and the plugins I'm going to be using, I want to give you a bit of a content warning. If you are icked out by mouth noises, this is not a video for you to watch. Seriously, just skip it. Find in the chapter list of the video what the conclusions are and skip to the conclusions to where I am no longer playing the disgusting mouth noises. Okay, here is Reaper and let's have a start. So I have taken an extract of audio with absolutely awful mouth noises. Again, let me apologise, but let's play it to you now.
Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but before he could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles, gripping him tightly.
That is unusable audio, frankly. So I am testing a number of mouth clickers to see how they do with that audio. In each case, I have split the audio in half. I play the first half of that section with no declicker and the second half with a declicker. And I'm testing the following declickers. I am testing the now free, if you look online, ERA 6 mouth declicker from Accusonus, who are no more. The RX11 declicker that is available in RX11 Elements. The RX11 mouth declicker that is available in RX Standard and RX Advanced. Velvet, which is another plugin from iZotope that is a sweetener kind of declicker, de-esser, tone shaper plugin. The regular declicker, the DeClick 2 from Acon Digital, and the dialogue declicker, Acon Digital DeClick Dialogue. I'm also testing Spiff by Oeksound, which is a transient shaper that was originally apparently designed as a mouth declicker, and or maybe it was designed as a general declicker. I can't remember. And finally, one of the plugins I've been most excited to play around with is CEDAR's De-Clicker, and CEDAR are famous for their plugins, as you may well know. So let's have a look at ERA 6. So this is as high as I have been able to set it before it starts really affecting the audio. This plugin has 2 modes, a broad mode and a normal mode. It is significantly less effective in the broad mode, so I have kept it at normal, and let's have a listen to it.
Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but before he could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles, gripping him tightly.
So what is worth noting there is the audio stays relatively unchanged. It certainly has a bit more of a muffled effect. You can still hear some of the declicking. So if I come up with a number of success criteria for these plugins, it's clearly going to be number 1, leaves the audio sounding as if it hasn't been heavily processed. Number 2, removes all the clicks. It needs to do both of those things to be successful. If a plugin removes all the clicks but changes the sound of the audio, what's the point? And honestly, all of these plugins will do that if you crank it up really high. Or if a plugin doesn't remove all the clicks, again, what is the point? So this removes most of the clicks, keeps the audio mostly the same. It's certainly a pretty damn good option in terms of the fact that it is free. For RX11 DeClick, I've played around a bit and I have found that having sensitivity at 4.9, click widening at 0 and the frequency skew at 0 with the low latency algorithm was the best balance of click reduction without affecting the audio, because the audio is really affected if you want to do something like periodic clicks, multiple bands.
Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but before he could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles, gripping him tightly.
So most of the clicks are removed, but again, the audio sounds a little muffled. Now, of course, that is not what the RX11 De-Click plugin is designed for. The mouth De-Click plugin is what is designed for mouth de-clicking. And for this, I've actually set the sensitivity slightly higher and the click widening slightly higher. Again, going any higher than this starts to really affect the audio, and let's have a listen.
Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but before he could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles, gripping him tightly.
So what is, of course, worth noting there is this is the first of the 3 plugins so far that has fully removed the clicks, or at least pretty much fully. I don't know if you can remove the clicks on such a bad piece of audio entirely without any effect to the audio, but the audio itself sounds far more natural than it did with the ERA 6 mouth declicker or the RX11 De-Click, the Elements version of the plugin. So far, this is the one to beat, and unsurprisingly, it is kind of an industry standard for a reason. Now, the next one's a bit of an interesting one. So what I've done is I've disabled sibilance detection, I've disabled the tonal change, and I've just put the declicker on here. I've set it to a strength of 7.9 with no frequency skew at all, and let's have a listen.
Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but before he could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles, gripping him tightly.
So very, very slightly muffled, removes all except I think one of the clicks, maybe 2 of the clicks nearer the start. What I do think, and this is where I think Velvet tends to be a bit of a secret weapon because it's also a really good de-esser, is Velvet is much, much cheaper than RX11 standard, and I do think it outperforms RX11 De-Click. So although it isn't going to outperform RX11 standard, it is going to outperform Elements, and it is the same price as Elements usually, often cheaper, often much cheaper when it's on sale. Let's start to have a look at the Acon digital plugins.
Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but before he could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles, gripping him tightly.
Now, this is an interesting plugin. It is, in fact, a click remover, a plosive remover, a thump remover, with a lot of different settings. And again, this is the set of settings that I found to be most effective. If crackle sensitivity is lower than click sensitivity, it does not seem to detect crackles at all. And it certainly detects some of these mouth noises as being crackles rather than clicks. In fact, I want to play this again so you can see the detections.
Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but before he could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles, gripping him tightly. Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but...
Well, this time, it apparently didn't detect anything as crackle, so who knows? Apparently, the Digital De-Click 2 plugin behaves differently each time I run it, which isn't the greatest sign in the world. That said, again, the audio is affected a bit, sounded a bit muffled, removed most of the clicks, performed very well. Didn't perform as well as Velvet, and I think is available only, I think the Acon digital plugin is only available as part of their Acoustica standard, maybe even Acoustica Premium plugin, which is, of course, a problem. That said, this is not... designed for mouse declicks. They have a different plugin for that. Acon Digital have a plugin called DeClick Dialogue, which is much simpler. And in this case, I have set it with the high pass and low pass filters to this, basically setting it to aggressive, have the click expansion to 1 millisecond, and this goes up high, this click expansion. And I set sensitivity to maximum, and the results are interesting.
Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but before he could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles, gripping him tightly.
Yeah, sensitivity to 100, and it doesn't remove all the clicks. I would say that this is the first full-on failure of the plugin in this video. So we'll move quickly past that one. Next up is Oeksound Spiff, and Spiff is confusing as anything to use. It is a very powerful plugin with a lot of settings, so I just set it to the remove mouse clicks preset and then cranked up the depth and the sensitivity until it got the level of reduction that I was looking for. Let's have a play.
Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but before he could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles, gripping him tightly.
So the thing that's really noticeable with Spiff is that if I want to remove all the mouse clicks, it starts making the audio sound different, almost like I'm talking through a piece of fabric or something, maybe even a wind filter. It is by far and away the most expensive plugin on this list in terms of kind of single plugin cost. I think RX11 Standard is more expensive because RX11 Standard is a suite of plugins as opposed to a single plugin. Certainly for the use of dialogue, I am not going to recommend Spiff. And on to our final plugin, which is the one I'm most excited about because, this is the first CEDAR plugin I've tested, the first of quite a few that are coming up, particularly noise reduction plugins, in the next few weeks. So let's have a listen to how it performs with the threshold set to 12. This is an interesting one, by the way. Lowering the threshold makes it more effective rather than raising the threshold. And I actually had to lower it all the way to 12 to get basically any effect, and then even lowering it to 11 massively makes a difference, 10 even more. At 3, it completely butchers the audio. So it's a bit of an odd one in terms of how the threshold works as sensitivity. Let's have a listen.
Jan lifted his head to shout a warning to Helly, but before he could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles, gripping him to the top of the water.
So it, other than the unexpected repeat, it didn't actually remove all the clicks. So let me show you what happens if you lower the threshold even more.
Across the top. He could do so, something green streaked across the top of the water, leapt into his arms and enclosed him in its 5 tentacles.
That really butchers the audio. So I'm really disappointed. I'm really disappointed. I had higher hopes for CEDAR. It makes me glad I've downloaded a trial rather than actually buying the plugin. So let me lead into my conclusions, and if you are sensitive to mouth noises and have skipped to this part of the video, hello and welcome. I'm going to be quite quick. My final conclusions are as following. So for a free option, ERA 6 is unbeatable. If you're willing to spend a bit more, then obviously there is a strong case to make for RX11 Elements because it includes more than just the DeClicker. But the DeClicker itself is without doubt outperformed somewhat by Velvet, which is a standalone plugin from iZotope. And if you are going the budget route and you do not want to spend the money on RX11 Standard, which outperforms Velvet again by a small margin, you will save money buying RX11 Standard or Velvet or just combining them both. Although at that point, you really do want to be going for sale prices. I have seen both on sale for as low as $29, if not lower. Certainly, I think Velvet was lower when it was introduced. I think it might have been even $19. And both perform excellently. But Velvet really does, for the price, outperform everything. For the Acon digital plugins, little needs to be said. They did not perform as well as I expected. And for Spiff, I'm afraid that the increased price does not come along with increased performance at this particular function. Spiff's great for certain things. It is not great compared to the specialist mouth declickers. And of course, finally, CEDAR really disappointed me, unfortunately. But of course, CEDAR's best known for its noise reduction plugins. And coming up next time, I am going to be doing a series of, I believe, 3 or 4 different videos on noise reduction plugins, trying to find the absolute best value, best performance, best noise reduction plugins out there. So far, the one to beat is DX Split from my recent review. That is the one that we're going to be competing against, particularly running on an M-series processor on a Mac. I look forward to seeing you next time for the first of those videos. If you have any comments or feedback, please leave them in the comment section below, and please do like and subscribe so that you get notified of my upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, And as always, bye-bye.